So we've changed tremendously in the last 10 years into the burden of proof, what it means. I think if every bank in Europe and UK actually added up how much it's paid out for PPI, it would be quite a couple of billions, quite a few. And therefore, if they'd have known that at the time, they would have invested in the systems. The problem is, we're now in a RegTech environment where everything's changing. As was said earlier, I was heavily involved in MiFID I, back to the commission level, and that only affected equities. That was a huge change, brought massive opportunities to the banks because they could trade equities on more than one venue, which they couldn't do before. So it led to the startup of BATS, Chi-X, Equiduct, which I was CEO for a time. So all of these new venues came about because of a new piece of regulation called MiFID I. However, MiFID I was quite loose in lots of ways, and therefore could be used it was not so problematic for the banks. They could make more money on it than it cost them. MiFID II is entirely the opposite, which it takes away the ability to make money because you cannot be in the middle and you can only be charged commission. I'm kind of summarizing, but that's effectively what it does. It says you have to be, to your customer, a completely transparent piece of glass as to how you execute the trade. If you put yourself in as a dark pool or a systematic internalizer, you are not allowed to trade with your customer unless the customer specifically asks to trade with you. That is a very different idea. In the past, broker networks, brokers always used to take a turn. You cannot now make a turn after MiFID II. And that's not just for equities. On the one day, we changed the equity market again, although relatively minor. We changed the fixed income market, which in a lot of countries is bigger than the equity market. We changed the derivatives market. We changed to an environment where, depending on what the data is of how you did that trade, depends on how you have to report that trade. So if you don't get the data right in the beginning, you won't report it correctly, and you'll be back to multi-million-pound fines, as certain Tier 1 banks have had for non-transaction and trade reporting already in the past. So the ability of the banks to have to cope with all this in a very short period of time is horrendous. And I'm not an advocate that this should all be done on one day. I've been trying to get them, they move different dates for different products because it's just not possible to do everything that's happening. But what it is going to drive is change in market structure. MiFID I happened at the same time as electronification of markets. So it became, you could make a lot of money about making a computer as a decision to trade between venue A and venue B, and you could then pay for that and get rid of people. And the thing about, I don't know if any of you saw iRobot, but the thing about a robot is it doesn't go on strike, doesn't have to be paid, it's made redundant, works 24 hours a day, and doesn't demand a bonus or a slice of the profits. All of things that traders can do, and they also take IP in their heads as they move from bank to bank. So computers don't do that. Quants do it to a point, but the quants write the computer programs which do the trading. In the new world, MiFID II, that world is in fixed income, derivatives, and everything else. Why? For two reasons. One, controlling the data for people trading, where you have a person in the link, is very, very difficult in timely enough to do the trade reporting and the transaction reporting within minutes of trade reporting in the correct manner. So everything is much easier if it's in a computer system. And two, we've already developed the algos in the equities world. There's a lot of money to use these in another world. So the equification of markets, as it's called, will happen quite quickly, far quicker than most people anticipate, I think. So all of these changes mean that RegTech is going to become very important. Technology in order to cope with that change. We are in the biggest change in the marketplace, in the banking marketplace we've seen. And to some ways, the new players on the block have got a better chance of winning that battle because the big banks have got huge legacy systems running on big mainframes from the past that they've got to actually manufacture into this real-time environment, whereas the new guys have got the newer, squeaky thing on the front. So it's a very, very interesting time to be in RegTech. It's a very, very interesting time for the other reason to be a bank. And I hope then in a couple of years' time, we all have a look back on this and say, yeah, that we got through that and it was positive. Don't forget, though, a year ago, or just under a year ago, we made another decision as a country, just to make life more interesting. We voted Brexit. The other thing that happened is we had a new president in the United States called Donald Trump. And I can tell you now, Europe hates Donald Trump to such an extent that their third-party regime that recognizes equivalence is being completely rewritten to ensure that America does not get third-party equivalence. When we leave the EU, we will be subject to exactly the same third-party equivalence as the US is. And it is highly likely that we will be considered non-GDPR as far as Europe, so you'll have to split European and UK data, and that some banks are already considering splitting themselves between having a European entity and a UK entity because they will not be able to trade easily between the two because we will not get full market activity. And I think that's been demonstrated over the last few days. Add that in the mix of everything else going on, and we're all going to be very busy.